Welcome to Noon Plus on 13 on your side. We continue to follow breaking news this noon hour as we've just obtained new documents from the courthouse that give more insight into what happened in that tragic triple murder Tuesday morning. Jacqueline Neal and her teenage sons Cameron and Michael Kilpatrick were found murdered in their home in Southeast Grand Rapids just before 8 o'clock that morning. According to the affidavit, the suspected killer, Charles Broomfield, called 911 after police believe he shot Neal and her sons. They say he was first crying too much for dispatchers to understand what he was saying, and when he called back, he told them that two possible people had broken into his home and shot someone. When officers got there, they say Broomfield was still in the home, still standing near Jacqueline Neal. Police say her body was on the floor and had been shot. I'm joined by 13 on your side's Callie Lichter here in the studio, who is just walking into the studio after reviewing these documents. You just got these from the courthouse. This has been an ongoing investigation now for the better part of the last 3 days. What sticks out to you in the new information that we just got?
So definitely with these new court docs, it kind of brings three pieces of the puzzle together. The first part, you have Broomfield allegedly calling 911, standing near his self-described fiance's body. Then you have the next part where the investigators are kind of casing the house, looking around in their initial interview with Broomfield, where he talks about what allegedly happened with the two suspects entering the house. He said that he was in his room with a 5-year-old son who, as far as we know, was unharmed in this incident, and that he heard both his fiance, I believe, and then his stepsons being shot. And then there is that third and final part where investigators bring him back in after inconsistencies that they list in this report, where he ultimately allegedly admits to killing the three.
You know, I think back to when we were first covering this on Morning Plus all of those days ago, so this would have been Tuesday. I think back to that day when the chief was, we had just gotten a soundbite from the chief, and the chief, Eric Winstrom, was talking about how he was questioning, or how officials were questioning the 911 caller here. We're now learning that 911 caller, presumably what he's talking about, is the suspect in this case. When we're looking at this investigation, what led them at that point to be able to focus on Broomfield as the primary suspect here? Because I think this is a very interesting piece of the puzzle. Yeah,
and mind me, if I'm looking at these documents again, they're very fresh. Went over them a couple of times. But, one of the biggest inconsistencies that they list is they said that the three were dead for an extended period, possibly 40 minutes, by the time that first person on scene, that first responder, got there. It wasn't something that happened fresh. They were kind of there. Another inconsistency is surrounding the lockbox with the gun inside, I believe. They said in the court documents, Broomfield said that another suspect was able to get the gun that he had in his room from the lockbox, but investigators did find that lockbox in the backyard of the house, and then they only found footprints leading from the house to that lockbox and then back inside the house. They didn't find footprints that would indicate there was two suspects in this. So just, a lot of inconsistencies that kind of made them go back to Broomfield saying, hey, this doesn't really line up with what you initially said and what we initially talked about.
And it's exactly what was talked about in the 911 call, kind of an inconsistency there. Another inconsistency is the way that the report that we received from the courthouse describes that it appears, according to officers, the victims had been deceased for an extended period of time. So they had been dead for a while before police had gotten there, which is another one of those inconsistencies as well. I think it's interesting that the report states what his original account of the events are, is that two people broke into his house. We're now learning that maybe that's not the case in this situation.
Yeah, and they said that both Neal and her sons died by the same gun after investigators looked over those casings that they located upstairs near the sons and next to Neal. They said they all died from the same gun, which also contradicts earlier Bloomfield's alleged report where he said that there was kind of 2 guns used by the 2 different suspects.
Yeah, and on your screen are the victims in this. That's Jacqueline Neal and then the 2 teenagers that were involved in this, unfortunately. You know, when we spoke to the chief on Tuesday, that Tuesday morning, it was pretty fresh after the scene had happened. It was about 9 o'clock when we had first talked to the chief of Grand Rapids Police in this situation. He had mentioned evidence found in the snow. So I think he mentioned tracks. I think he mentioned some other things that may have been found in the house. You know, from what you're able to gather, how does this kind of play into their investigation here?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely that initial information that we got from Chief Windstrom kind of is consistent with, the initial report from Broomfield, and then also that initial investigation and what they were kind of finding. I mean, around 9 a.m., that's about an hour and 20 minutes after they were initially called to the scene. It seems like that approximately, they say 7:40 a.m. that morning is when all this happened. So, very fresh. They were just finding that alleged lockbox in the backyard. They were just finding those prints in the snow. And I mean, at that point when the scene is so fresh, all they have to go on is, the lone adult in the house who's alive. So they kind of have to go off of that report and then try to verify the claims in that report from Broomfield.
You're talking about the scene being fresh. We're taking a look at video from the day that this all happened. I mean, there was snow on the ground. It was actively snowing, fresh snow on the ground where they could see those tracks in real time. I want to kind of dive deeper into the relationship and the household dynamic that we were seeing here. And of course, unfortunately, we're learning this is likely a domestic violence or a very violent domestic violence situation here. What was the relationship like between Broomfield and Jacqueline Neal? I think that's one question a lot of people have had since this case came out.
Yeah, I know that's definitely a question that in these docs, it doesn't really, answer that well, but in the report, Broomfield does call Neal his fiance. He does call the 2 boys his stepsons, and I know especially in these winter months, domestic violence is on the rise when everyone is inside a house together. You're contained. That's definitely something that unfortunately we see when the weather turns.
Yeah.
And looking into it over the past couple of days, there was not an extensive criminal history for Broomfield. I didn't see any reports from what I was seeing of domestic violence or other violent crimes. I saw some traffic incidents, but nothing of the sort.
Yeah.
And really, again, talking through a bunch of horrible domestic violence cases that we see in West Michigan, unfortunately, every single year, and talking to people who can help through those things, people who learn about these things, and they say, things can turn at a drop of the hat sometimes.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to hear. And of course, this is just the police affidavit that we're getting in this. We had been hearing bits and pieces of what was coming out about this story. It's not until we get these court documents, just to give you a little bit of our process here back at the newsroom, we get these documents and that kind of reveals the overall narrative that police are going with in this, or what they believe to be fact in this case. Of course, these things will presumably be tried at some point in a court. But of course, also, the other point of this case, too, that we're learning is that there was somebody else in the home. Aside from the teenagers and aside from Jacqueline Neal, there was a little boy in the house.
Yeah, and it says in this affidavit that they were able to find, investigators were able to find the key to that gun lockbox. It was on a lanyard and with a tab on it, so I'm assuming that would mean a keychain, saying #1 dad and a photo of that 5-year-old son. So, unfortunately, there is those 3 victims who are deceased. But I mean, you have a little boy, a 5-year-old boy who was in the house. I mean, definitely probably heard something, saw something.
Right.
That's something that's going to have to live with this child for the rest of his life.
Yeah, unfortunately. And you think about the family members that were in the house at the time. You've got now 2 perhaps stepbrothers gone. You've got family that is gone now, one by a death, one perhaps by the legal system that will play out, the legal process that might play out here. It's very heartbreaking, especially when we learn that, yes, there was another child inside that home. We have been talking about this as kind of a domestic violence situation. In just a few minutes, we are going to be speaking with the Domestic Violence Action Network, as they are telling us that they are releasing a statement about this situation, as this is one of the more violent violent acts of crime that we've seen in the city in a long time, especially, I mean, Chief Windstrom even pointed that out on the day that we talked to him a couple days ago. We're going to be talking with them coming up here in just a few minutes. We're going to ask them about how common these situations are, how you can get help if you need it, and what to do if you suspect somebody is the victim of domestic violence. That's coming up here in just a few minutes.